When I left Christianity and fundamentalist religion and churches, I realized that churches teach its members that God's plan is inevitable, unavoidable, and will always happen. Now, I've talked in previous episodes about how life is short, and every moment spent doing anything that makes you a passive writer in your own life is a moment wasted. I lived 31 years as a passenger in my own life. If people asked me, how did you make decisions? My response would be, I don't make decisions. God reveals his plan. Can you imagine living your life as an adult woman? Your whole life centers around what one man who takes a divinity or a divine form, that's the person you wait to hear from. You center your life around a male deity. If anyone were to take God out of the situation and put a human man in that scenario, we would have a walking red flag extravaganza. If any God, if any man-made male human being required everyone to be on their knees their entire life, worshiping and praising him, we would call him a narcissist, an egotistical maniac. And yet, because God just happens to be divine, that there are different rules. There isn't. Any man, any woman who behaves like this in the human world would be a massive red flag in any group of people. If any human man required everyone their whole life to worship this person, be on their knees, and to live their life under this person's plan, we would call this person a narcissist. But yet God gets a free pass because he's divine. And yet no one has ever seen God in their right mind or not under the influence of some kind of hallucinogen or hysteria. God has never been seen by human eyes. He's never been felt either. But somewhere, somehow, people have daily conversations with a God. And if you go outside of America and extremely Catholic or Protestant locations, you will find that people worship to every kind of God. Interesting fact, I watched something on YouTube, I think it was Christopher Hawkins, that was talking about, Christopher Hitchens was talking about how all gods before Christianity became the biggest organized religion under I think it was the 4th century AD. Before Christianity and the Roman Empire became at its height, there were more female goddesses than there were male. And yet, Christians eradicated any goddess that wasn't a male god. Religion used to be dominated by female or feminine deities. And yet, any culture that has touched Christianity, you won't see any female divinities or deities anywhere where Christianity It's just not how Christianity works, because Christianity doesn't see women as equal to men. The most famous scholars, like St. Augustine, called women deformed men. That's how early Christian scholars viewed women. And if any man wrote that kind of prose now, he would be labeled a misogynistic pig. But because he wrote it before the printing press was invented, people call him a divine Christian orator. In my opinion, any document that is extremely misogynistic and views women as less than men or a deformed man, I don't really want to read anything they have to say. They're dead to me. Well, 99% of them are dead anyways. Because they've been dead for probably 500 to 1,500 years, but still. I don't want to read any book, any historical document where people viewed somebody as less than. Even though Thomas Jefferson wrote pamphlets that said that African American brains were less developed than white ones. That's terrible. But anyone who believes that some God has a special plan for your life, and that your eternity and life here on earth depends on how well you interpret that plan and how God talks to you, it always astounds me how people are unable to make their own decisions without a masculine divine influence. You ever notice how most major religions have a monotheistic male godhead? Judaism, Allah, Jehovah, they're all male divinities. I always wondered why certain religious factions aren't as popular. I would wager they didn't help white male privilege, or what we call the chosen people of God analogy. That's why places under Buddhism, I mean, they're great places, but the countries that are in the top 10 most powerful are probably not Hindu or Buddhist countries. They're going to be first world countries, usually under Christian or Muslim religious beliefs. Even though the most progressive countries are the cold countries, especially this time of year. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, all of those little, very interesting countries. Luxembourg, they're extremely atheistic. I'm talking 80% minimum atheistic citizens. The less you believe in any male god, the more progressive your country, your society is, the less gun violence, murder, and all kinds of very uncomfortable things to talk about. It's not a surprise. I always say, it's not a surprise that certain countries run circles around Christian Muslim countries. Because when you view women as equal assets, not for what comes out of their body, not for what they can do for men, but because they're human beings, whether or not they do anything to help anyone. Countries that have mandatory maternity leave, they treat and view women with much more respect than countries that are Christian or Jewish treat their citizens. This is why I always say, if you want to be the most progressive, the most scientifically educated country, eradicate religion. Just get rid of it. You want to be the most progressive, the one that has just the best functioning of government, the most social, familial, and governmental progress. Throw off the shackles of religion, because the most progressive countries on the planet are 80% or higher atheistic. We are 1,000 years behind the times because the Catholic Church made it illegal to teach, print, or believe anything that went against the beliefs of the Catholic Church, even if now we know that most of their teachings are utter bullshit. Especially Galileo risked his life to teach something beyond what the church had endorsed. Anytime religion mixes with science, you have problems. And I went through 12 years of Christian homeschooling. Not one time did we learn about evolution or anything having to do outside of creationism. That's terrifying even now to think about. You live your life completely surrounded and underneath the headship of a divine male entity. You are going to have problems. And everyone's different. I mean, not everybody is going to internalize male headship as trauma, but a lot of people do. Religions that are governed by female leaders and have female goddesses or female spirits will be inherently less abusive, less capitalistic, less female violent centered communities. When people look up to women the same way they look up to God, there is less violence against women. And if you have to pray to make a decision, I don't want anything keeping me from making my own decisions. I don't care what any God on this earth says about anything. Because all their books were written before we had any understanding of how the body works, how reproduction functions, how social and morality in a modern context even existed back then. They believed in slavery when all of these Bibles, these Torahs, and I forget what they call the Muslim book. Quran, is that it? All of these were written before we had any concept about anything that isn't prehistoric. If books were written now that were the symbol of a belief system, they would not look anything like the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, because we understand how things function. We don't rely on superstition and myths. 90% of the planet doesn't rely on myths anymore to live their lives. I'm glad to have thrown off any religion that keeps me from being the driver in my own life, the captain of my own ship. I take responsibility for my choices, and I do not trust anyone enough to let them make my own decisions. That's one of the biggest privileges of living in the 21st century as an adult. I can vote. I can live wherever I want. I can be single. I can have kids. I can do whatever I want to do. I don't need a male guardian. I don't need anything from anyone to live my life. It doesn't mean I don't have friends and I don't go out and do things. I just don't need a male influence to have a good life. Personally, life becomes much more worth living the less you center the opposite sex, or whatever sex you're into. I live a better life not relying on having to listen to a male authority figure, because I just don't need that kind of toxic masculinity in my life. Even to this day, I do not have a positive feeling about being under the spiritual headship of any privileged male, God or the pastor. I should write a book about the churches I've been to. It'd be a soap opera. I'm not wasting a moment of my life praying to a God that doesn't exist, who never has answered me, never answered any of my prayers, who requires things that if any male human required, or expected, or punished, we would call them a narcissist. I don't want God's plan. I don't want any plan but my own. And if I don't like something, if I want to marry, I don't consult a male authority figure to make a decision. I don't live in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan where I'm forced under the law to live my life under male guardianship. I don't need it. My body and my brain is not a less functioning or a mutant of a male existence. I reject all religions because they hold views that show women as a deformed male, or they don't have a fully functioning brain, which we know is utter BS. Atheism treats women overall with much more respect than any religion could ever consistently offer. We don't have any misogynistic writers who write Bibles that force billions of people, probably trillions from the beginning of time, to believe utter ridiculousness. I just don't need God. And I'm not angry at God, because God has never existed. I'm angry at the people in charge, usually privileged men, who purposely created a male God to program women from the cradle, usually, to never be the prime character of their own story. Women are always secondary. They're always not the center of what's going on. Live the life you want. I don't feel the need to ask a male deity anything. I've never believed in Santa Claus because my family viewed Santa Claus as though he was Satan. But I acknowledge Santa Claus. But we all know that Christmas only comes together because of the invisible labor of women. It's not because of a white man in a sleigh. Women should trust their instincts, their gut, make their own decisions. And if their religion, their family, and the men in their life don't like it, well, fuck you. Who cares? Everyone is responsible for their own decisions. And if what's going on in this world is God's plan, he is one messed up, narcissistic egomaniac. Because what's going on in the world, that has really always gone on, is some messed up garbage. I don't have to read the newspaper to see some of the messed up stuff that goes on. I survived going to over a dozen churches. Hypocrisy reigns supreme. And the most miserable people I have ever met are religious people, preferably Christians. Because when you live under an iron fist of privileged male authority, divine or human, you inherently have a less positive living experience. It's just how it is. Women aren't in charge consistently. And in my opinion, that is one of the saddest parts about organized religion. And the majority of people that go to church are women, even though their religion views them as less than a man. And if you actually read the Bible and read the most famous Christian authors, that's enough to turn you away from organized religion for life. I'm lucky to have escaped before half of my life was over. I don't need anyone's plan. And if you're not the person who is driving your own life, you're missing out. And if you make mistakes, that's part of life. You learn from them. If you want to live a life, a consensual life, where someone is in charge of you, fine. There's a difference between kink and religion. And it's really hard because the line is very blurred. Is it consensual or not when people are in religion? If you don't know anything else and you don't understand misogyny, most women live in churches and religions that view them with utter contempt. And if they actually read the books that symbolize their religion, they wouldn't like their religion. Because I read a lot of Christian books, including the Bible. The way they treat women, the way they talk about women, and the way they objectify women is abhorrent. I want nothing to do with organized religion. It's a cancer. And nothing good that comes out of religion makes up for all the bad that happens in the name of religion. And I'm glad to be the person who makes decisions about my own life. I waited halfway through my 20s to be able to make my own decisions. No God, no male guardian, no husband, no father, no one is going to take away my autonomy. And when you live praying and you are giving away your agency and your autonomy in whatever form you choose, life is too short to give away any of your agency to any male or female person.